Okay, we are live tonight. I am very excited to be joined by Caryma Sa'd. Caryma, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. I'm looking forward to this because, as I'm sure you've been told before, you're somewhat of a polarizing figure on, the across the political spectrum, and your work is really interesting. And I have a lot of questions, but I don't know much about you. So I'm going to learn about you along with the audience tonight. So why don't you give everybody an introduction and like a brief overview of your origin story?
Right on. So my name's Caryma Sa'd, and I am a lawyer turned journalist. During the pandemic, I started to document protests that were happening initially outside my office, and then um, it became a broader scope. I was at the Freedom Convoy and continued to document protests even post lockdowns. And I have witnessed all manner of interesting gatherings and demonstrations for a variety of movements. And my current focus at the moment is trying to understand and unpack and explain the Antifa movement. Um, as I mentioned, my background is in law, and so I've come at this from sort of a civil liberties perspective, freedom of expression, trying to understand the Canadian response to whether it be domestic or international political issues, how we express ourselves, how law enforcement handles that, how media covers it, how government interacts with all of these institutions. And so it's an ongoing project that I am calling Protest Mania. It's an apt descriptor, I think, including because there are so many elements of this phenomenon that are similar to professional wrestling, which is a hobby and passion of mine. So that's kind of in a nutshell who I am.
That's really interesting. Professional wrestling. That's it. I did one tweet. I don't know what I was thinking. Usually I'm very focused on what I know about when I tweet. But for some reason I branched out and did a tweet about wrestling one time. And I know nothing. Nothing. Like I know Hulk Hogan. I think that's it. Maybe there was like a Scottish one back in the day. That's about the extent. But then people started commenting and I was like, what have I done? Like I don't
It's
even
a
know what
great
they're saying.
fandom. How did you end up commenting on wrestling with no?
I don't know. It came up in my feed and I was like, I want an opinion, like, but normally I don't do that. But I went out on a lark and it really came back to bite me because I obviously had no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's a hornet's nest for sure.
And people are very opinionated, I learned about wrestling. It's not a neutral ground.
No, no, it is not. And in many ways, wrestling is life, and that it
Yeah.
holds true.
When I was reading about you, somebody described you as a cartoonist. I didn't know that. Was that like a past life, like that you were an artist or?
So I guess between 2019 and 2023 or so, I would commission um, political cartoons and cover topics of the day, sort of expressing my take on it through kind of an art director sort of way with a few different cartoonists. And some of those really resonated with people. And as I started doing more and more of the protest stuff, that a little bit fell by the wayside. But I've always, you know, expression is a really a central part of my being. Right, finding different ways to express and consume other people's expression. So comics for me are a huge part of that.
That's really interesting. It seems like you do a lot of different things. And I think that maybe I find it relatable, but as someone who has a lot of different interests, I think that it helps to broaden a person's understanding and maybe make things a little bit more nuanced when you I don't know, have so many different life experiences that you bring into analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Like instead of being a topic specialist, which I really appreciate topic specialist because I'm the total opposite. I'm more of a generalist. But when you're a generalist, like you can sometimes see things that aren't even obvious to the topic specialist because they're so knowledgeable, you know, in a certain area. And I think with the protests like that, it comes in handy. You cover. So are you doing this daily? It's almost every day, right? That you're out on the streets.
There are practically daily protests. I'm not out every single day. I pick and choose ones that I think will be interesting for whatever reason, whether it's a new setting or familiar characters or a particularly, you know, a novel cause or whatever the case may be. But there's an app in Toronto that allows you to see the different calls that go into police, and it gives you kind of a location of where they are. And there are demonstrations every day in Toronto. So it wouldn't be possible even to cover everything, but I do get to quite a bit.
Wow. Okay. And your videographer, are you always working together or do you split up?
We mostly work together, and sometimes are simultaneously at different events, or sometimes I will be offsite, kind of viewing things through his lens and directing that way.
Okay. Because I don't know Toronto, I've been to one event only. I cover mainly Montreal, and then I've been to Ottawa as well several times. But my experience in Toronto was that it's a lot less violent and hostile than it gets in Montreal. But the exception to that rule seems to be you and your videographer, who seem to get assaulted on a regular basis.
So I think there's a couple of things in that. First, we're not limited to Toronto, so we do Ottawa sometimes, and then we do surrounding areas, and just generally across Ontario. So events all the way from Niagara Falls and Hamilton to Windsor to London, Peterborough. It's we cover that geographical area. Again, there's too many things to attend everything, but if something stands out, I think Montreal is terrifying. And you're right, it is a different game. Toronto is quite a bit of posturing, so it's aggressive, but there's something maybe about the city that is a little soft compared to other parts of the country, even though they don't perceive themselves that way. And as far as the aggression that's directed at me and my videographer, I would say that has come about as a result of a coordinated campaign within activist circles to try and bully out a lens that they can't control, and that undermines, I think, part of their intent and purpose in protesting. Right, an independent lens just is a nuisance for them, and so that's a component of it, trying to bully us out. And then there's also an aspect where, particularly if it's a charged issue, which most of the stories we cover are, people have a lot of pent up feelings, and to be able to have an outlet for their rage that's tangible and standing right in front of them. And, they may not think critically about, who is telling me that these guys are evil and have I seen it for myself? And, how do I assess that? And what does it mean to, but that none of that thinking process happens when there's an opportunity to yell, scream, or hit at someone who's right there, right? And then kind of comes to represent everything that they're mad about. So yeah, it is an escalating problem. Sometimes I'm asked, because I cover movements on the left and the right, and I'm not really weighing in on the underlying issues. My focus is truly on the Canadian response and what tactics are being used, what messaging, and how that's covered in the media and how police are interacting with them. So people project all sorts of assumptions and opinions onto me. Maybe they will have read the comment section and assume that, I agree with one thing or another that they saw. And that's really, I don't do much to moderate the comments. And I'm mindful that the same video can elicit completely opposite reactions from different people, depending where they fall on the spectrum and what baggage they bring as viewers. So I think a lot of the aggression is misplaced, but it's convenient. And, then there's the element of, because we are diligent and methodical and kind of capture things that might not otherwise be seen, it has gotten some people into trouble for the way that they choose to behave on public, and it's captured on camera. And then the negative feelings associated with that become somehow my responsibility, or I'm to blame. So I don't accept any of that, but it is the reality in which we operate.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of you as, more towards the progressive side on the political spectrum. And it seems kind of fascinating to me that some people on the far right absolutely love you, I think, because of your coverage of some of the different protests, as well as thinking you're fair, because I think at some point you represented Jeremy McKenzie. I don't know in what capacity, but
I wasn't his counsel, but
okay,
I assisted his counsel when they were
okay,
at the POEC, and just generally took an interest in his case from the perspective of a defense lawyer and someone who was at the convoy and kind of was familiar with him and his work.
yeah, yeah. So that, I think, won some respect, I guess, maybe from that his group. And then I think I've seen you work before. I don't think I said hi to you, but I don't think you probably don't remember, but it was in Ottawa, and it was at Billboard Chris, like a Chris Elston
On
and Josh
Broadview.
Alexander event. Yeah. And I took actually a picture. I should send it to you. It's cute, of you having a conversation with Viva Fry, with David Freiheit, and it's just like very natural. But I was very surprised by the reaction of some of the people on the transanity, that's what I call it, I don't know what to call it, like on the opposing side to the parental rights side, because they're quite hostile with you. So it's strange. It's like they're eating someone you're quite neutral in your coverage, I'd say. And so it's almost like they're eating someone who's more ideologically aligned with them. And I wonder if that is to do with the fact that you were like firm in your values with all of the anti-hate stuff. So maybe you could tell people a little bit about that. I don't want to, speak for you.
Sure. So part of what got me really committed to covering protests was in July of 2021, I tried hosting a comedy show and podcast recording that would have included an interview with Chris Guy, who was at the time a very prominent voice on the anti-mask, anti-vaccine side of things. Him and I had sort of a little bit of an online beef stemming from a comic, actually, that I didn't realize would get under his skin to the extent that it did. And so we had this, I was review bombed on Google, and then just was getting all of these nasty messages from his supporters. And there was an opportunity to interview him. And I thought that that would be fun. And a lot of people actually were interested to see how that would play out. And prior to the event, I started to get messages, including from the Canadian Anti-Hate Network, telling me that it was too dangerous, that Chris Sky's fascist followers were going to accost the elderly in Chinatown, just like absolute nonsense. And, I thanked them for their input and carried on with my plans. But unfortunately, I did not anticipate the presence of protesters who blockaded the venue, were masked, had bikes that they were using sort of as a barricade, and they got violent. And that was my first experience with what I would now consider, and having identified some of them after the fact, Antifa activists. Um, and it wasn't just that the show was canceled and, you know, that was the end of it. The real attacks began afterward with the smear campaign and framing me as a white supremacist sympathizer of Nazis, fascist, anti-fascist, I think is the term that they used. And the Anti-Hate Network published an article that was just, it was characterizing me in ways that were simply not accurate. And I began to see how kind of there was this wave of people who just consumed that uncritically, and just accepted that I was this villainous, wicked, evil person who, was trying to harm the community and harm the good guy activists who are defenders, and just it didn't conform to reality at all. And it made me start to question, like, what have I accepted at face value that maybe wasn't true or accurate? And who are these people to tell me what I'm allowed to do or say, or who I can talk to? Like, it was an affront. And so I decided to then take my show on the road, and I started attending every Chris Sky rally that I could, because he was having a lot of rallies at that time. And from those, it became really interesting. I had a good time with it. And so they set me on this path, but all along the way, I've had to deal with these ongoing attacks against my character, my intentions, my associations, all manner of just awfulness and lies. Um, and yeah, it turns out that there's not a lot of room to deviate from the prescribed orthodoxy, which itself is determined in sort of arbitrary ways. And so that just isn't something that I'm interested in. I think that it's quite unprincipled, actually. And the my moral compass doesn't allow it. And so I've begun this journey of really questioning everything, which is exhausting, and a little bit discombobulating at times, because I felt adrift in certain ways. But I'm, that has brought me to where I am right now. And uh, things simply aren't as they appear, or aren't as they are reported in very simplistic terms on mainstream media. There are all sorts of misrepresentations or narratives that kind of are seeded and then take control. And behind this is millions and millions of dollars. So there's a real hate industry that kind of exists alongside the protest circuit. And I think that is something that is worthy of study. And that's what propels me to keep going.
Yeah, you said a lot that I couldn't agree more with. Having done some investigations into various individuals involved in the different protests. I cover, because I'm in Montreal, I cover primarily the Palestinian protests because it's kind of the hot spot, I'd say, for the most radical elements of those protests. But along with those protests are also Antifa and various other types of people. And then I've also been to a protest before that was primarily, I guess, conservatives and Muslims together who were coalescing around an anti trans ideology in the school. So sometimes there's a lot of interesting bedfellows. But you do get to know the main, characters, if to put it in the wrestling in the wrestling terms, at these protests. And then you also start to notice, you start to observe things like collections for charities. I did an investigative report into some of the funding of one of the charities that's oftentimes at these events, and how it was fed back to the Middle East through what, oh, you have a cat too, through through what process. So it gets really a lot deeper than I think what people understand from a 2-minute puff piece about a peaceful protest on the news. And it's also interesting because in my coverage, I almost never see legacy media. It's really rare, or if I do, I see them for just a few minutes. And you like to watch them work is interesting as well, because they go in, you can tell that they find people that will be the most amenable to presenting their lens, I guess, whatever narrative they want to put forward. Like, they usually find like pretty sweet people that are not like directly involved. They're not the organizers. They're not the radicals that are going. And they almost never show the violence, unless they sometimes show police violence, but it really is a skewed, in my opinion, a skewed framing of what happens at these protests. But I want to show people some of your work because you sent me a lot. So is that okay? Is it a good time to
Yeah,
get into it?
of course. I'm in
Okay.
your hands.
Okay. So I'm going to put up, I just put them up in the order that you sent them to me. So do you want me just to start? One second, I have to remove it and put it back up. Do you want me just to start playing it, or would you like to give people a little bit of context first or after? It's up to you.
Maybe I can explain just where we are in this, just real brief. So this was in Ottawa, actually on Broadview. So where you and I met, but 2 years later, and much smaller in scale. Sort of the pulse of things changed after October 7, where there was previously a lot of attention on parental rights versus gender ideology. And then very abruptly, that energy shifted to Palestine. And that shift, it kind of, interesting, bedfellows is very accurate, because there were people who were on opposite sides pre-October 7 who then started protesting shoulder to shoulder, and then there were groups that were cohesive before October 7 that fractured. So that was like it really shifted the landscape. Anyway, back to this clip here. This was in Ottawa, and I was trying to, at this stage, just get like a quick hit in front of the school, away from the crowds. It was already very apparent that there was hostility towards us on at least one side of the demonstrators. So I asked police to escort me over, because that's what they had asked me to do. So I took them up on that, and you'll see sort of how police handle this situation.
Okay.
Get away from the school, you turd!
Go home fast! Get your picture, get your picture.
We are in front of a local public school on Broadview Avenue. Police kindly escorted us to this area so that we could get a shot with the flagpoles in the background. A couple of black bloc agitators followed us.
Trans rights are human rights!
So unfortunately, police tried to assist. Ultimately, we're not able to keep us there safely. We agreed in advance that if we were asked to move because police felt it was unsafe, that we would do so. Police obviously feel that it's unsafe, and I can see why.
Human rights! Trans rights are human rights! Trans rights are human rights! Trans rights are human
Mind you, we did ask for permission and got a police escort so that we could do our job in safety. We were denied that opportunity by the masked individuals who are following me right now.
Okay.
Like, to me, that's kind of shocking. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that's normal for police to not be able to guarantee your safety in a public space like that, and to not arrest or detain the people who are clearly being aggressive and intimidating and causing a disturbance. But that's what's really shocking about it, is how normal it is, and how that is the case for police forces across Ontario, in how they deal with protests. I think that there is primarily a lens of crowd control and path of least resistance to ensure maximal peace and order, which means, acquiescing at times to unreasonable demands on the part of protesters who simply don't like the presence of someone who, in my case, they assume what my opinions are or why I'm there. But that's not actually a neutral form of policing. It I would say, curtails my rights and the rights of other independent journalists,
And the rights of the public.
and the general public. Absolutely.
To get the story,
Mm-hmm. And often there is a story, right? So, shortly after this clip, there was a protester talking about being invited by the principal to be there and counter protest. And, I never got a response from the school on that being the case. But, there's often little nuggets like that if you aren't there on the ground to capture it, it would just go unknown and untold. So I do believe there's value in being there and being physically present. And I'm of the opinion that amplifying, like, that should be something that protesters welcome, a camera to amplify them, and it's up to them to behave then in ways that they want to see represented. And it's just, that doesn't always happen. And they will sort of, oh, you're going to misrepresent us. You're going to do this, that, or you're here to agitate. But like, the agitation is just standing there. So it is a very weird social environment to operate in, almost like the usual rules that we would expect, they just don't apply.
Yeah, that exactly mirrors my own personal experiences. I haven't been able to get through all of my footage from Tuesday, but on Tuesday, we were once again removed from covering a protest and told that we were creating an event. Our mere presence, silently standing there, was creating an event because the anti-Israel protesters who were there don't like me. And so I had to leave. When I asked where I could film from, because after, I don't know if you saw this or not, but I was violently arrested in April, and it was, it's an ongoing situation,
Mm-hmm.
but it was traumatic. So I don't want to be manhandled again and thrown on, concrete steps and injured again. So I ask for very specific directives. Where exactly am I permitted to stand? And the response was anywhere but here. So the directives are unclear. They prevent us from doing our jobs. I was quite persistent on Tuesday about where I could go because I didn't want to be manhandled again and thrown on the ground. So finally, I kept asking different police officers, and I found one who said, okay, we're going to go to the Tim Hortons, like a specific spot.
Mm-hmm.
We were so far away that we couldn't pick up, could barely pick up the audio. There were other independents who were there who had better gear than me. So they were able to get a bit of it, but it is in the public interest. There was a call and answer. I've recorded this call and answer before. It is a call and answer that is directly from Hamas, and it is calling for holy war. Is it a holy war? Indeed, it is a holy war. You probably heard it before. It's a Inahula jihad, and then they go back and forth. So I believe it's very important for the public to know that was being chanted at basically a celebration for October 7th in the city, with probably thousands of people in attendance. It's important. Like, the public needs to know what's going on. And the police's approach to it is basically, the protesters are violent. We can't ensure your safety. We're not going to arrest them for breaking the law. We're going to remove you because, you're small and we can remove you. That's my impression. And I understand that they have a public safety. They have to ensure public safety. I understand that, some of them I know are heartfelt when they speak to me and do say, like, honestly, like, we can't keep you safe. And they are legitimately worried because there are sometimes no backups. I've been told that, frankly, before. We don't have backups. We can't call anybody in, and it's escalating. So I do understand the crowd control limitations, but it's up to the city to then hire more police officers or manage the protests in such a way that there are arrests when people are violent, and the violence will stop if there are consequences. But since it's a consequence-free experience for the protesters, they're quite emboldened, and they're increasingly aggressive. Like, they will hit me right in front of police officers. They do not care. They will swarm me in front of police officers. They will swear at me. They will rub up against me. They don't care. They're not afraid to do this in front of the police. So yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying. But it's really hard to do the work when we can't get close to the protesters, So I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah, it's almost like that's by design, and they sort of
Yeah.
it feeds each other. And I don't pretend to fully understand the policing perspective. I do know that there is a lot of money that has been allocated to protests and demonstrations. And, if they're able to get away with babysitting rather than actual intensive policing, and given that the frontline officers put themselves at risk when they have to intervene in situations. They themselves can be mobbed.
Yeah.
I've witnessed more than one de-arrest where someone is taken into custody briefly and then basically plucked away from the hands of police. So I understand all of that
What?
is
Sorry,
at
can you
play.
elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the most memorable incident was outside of a synagogue in North York, and protesters were opposed to a real estate event that was happening inside. Some of the land up for sale was contentious. Um, and a young woman was arrested by police. They sort of marched her away, and a crowd swarmed the cops and basically got the girl away from police. And let her go, and they just didn't return her. And that was kind of the end of it. And I've seen that happen more than once. So it's not safe really when it gets to that situation. I do believe that it's a relatively small core group of people, at least in Toronto, who have that mindset, but it's infectious, right? And so someone
Sorry, which mindset?
the mindset of it's okay to use violence against police,
Okay,
for example.
I see.
But it's sort of a spoiled apple in a bin situation where other people then will buy into it, even if they came to a protest with no intention of fighting police. And just kind of still on that subject, where the Antifa element is embedded in different protest causes, there is a real, like, it's part of the objective, I think, for those activists to get footage that will be used in anti-police messaging, and to provoke confrontations with police and then reframe it as oppression. And that is not I don't think that's good for anyone to go about it in that way. Certainly, it's mostly marginalized people who are on the receiving end of those violent interactions.
Not
Um,
always.
Not always. No, no, no.
I'm just kidding.
Well, when when it's when it's the protesters against police,
Yeah.
right? So yours, they would probably celebrate that clip as
Oh, they
finally
they
the
they show it
police.
to me over and over
Yeah,
again. They shove it in my face. They were showing me
yeah.
the other night, but the thing is, I'm immune. I've seen it many times.
And that's where that whole unprincipled thing, we come back to that, right? Like, it's either police brutality is bad across the board or it's not, right? You
Yeah.
can't you can't celebrate it when it's against people you don't like and then be mad when you're the one under arrest. And that, I like, I felt that way in the convoy, because at that time a lot of my audience, at least who were actively engaged, were probably opposed to the convoy protest, and some were kind of eager for this police crackdown. And it exposed kind of an ugliness, I think, in people who otherwise presented as pleasant and normal. And I think that we're in a even more polarized situation today than we were 5 years ago. And that
Yeah.
ugliness is becoming just normalized. So I don't know. I don't have a solution for it. It's just an observation. But I think that across the board, this is all bad for civil liberties, right? Where you have this constant state of unrest and police unable to really do their jobs, or unwilling, or whatever the case may be. It's all just ushering in a justification for actual repression.
Yeah, in Montreal, the police have a complicated situation because I don't know if you're aware, but some people who are watching might not be, even if you are. But there was a lawsuit against, I don't know if it was the city and the police or specifically just the police, but there was a lawsuit that went on for years and years in Montreal. And it was of claims of police, like excessive use of force, I guess, police brutality. I'm not sure exactly the legal terms, the correct ones, but for some violence during a protest. And I don't know the details. I didn't do a deep dive to see exactly what happened, but the city ended up settling. It did not go to trial, or if it was in very early stages. And they made a huge settlement agreement with the people that brought the charges forth, that brought the lawsuit forth. And my understanding is that it didn't come out of the city budget. It came out of the allocation towards the policing. I might be butchering the details, but I think this is a fair overview. So it was kind of a roundabout way of defunding the police without defunding the police, because they were meant to pay it out. I don't know if they paid out all of it yet, but that definitely sent a message to the police that they're not able to arrest people when things do get out of control. And it also cut the policing budget. And something that the legacy media won't report on is that there is a lack of police officers in Montreal. And there's kind of an agreement between, I was told by a police officer, there's kind of an unspoken agreement or a spoken agreement between the city of Montreal and most of the major newspapers not to advertise the fact that they're lacking police because they don't want to embolden criminals. But people need to know that there is a lack of police, and that a lot of police are doing overtime, which is also very costly to the city because you're paying more than you would pay for an extra police officer, right? So it's complicated in the case of Montreal as to why they seem to be enabling the protesters, but they're between a little bit of a rock and a hard place because of the Valérie Plante administration, and she's very radical. So it adds another, I guess, nuance. But it's a very bad situation because it's only escalating in Montreal. So I'd like to play this next clip of yours, but I just want to test it first because something came up on my computer saying that we wouldn't have sound. So can we just do a test for a second?
Of course.
Okay. I can hear it. Can you?
I don't, but I know what happens.
Okay. Do people need to be able to hear it?
Yeah, this one is a conversation, so maybe we skip. So basically this is, and these are all available on my Twitter feed. This was like my first experience at a demonstration realizing that Antifa was a situation in Canada. So I was still, I think, quite green here. This was December of 2022. And I sort of walked into Welland, Ontario, naively and encountered real personalized hostility from just complete strangers. So people I'd never met with, never interacted with. This was kind of, it gave some insight into what happens behind the scenes in the chat rooms, in the Discord servers, in the Signal groups, right? Of what is said or spread, and how that is imbibed by protesters and how they interpret it. And yeah, it was an eye-opening experience, in particular because this group of mostly white people just persisted in calling me a racist and a
White
Nazi.
supremacist.
Yeah, and it was just so bizarre. Um, it comes out of nowhere, and it's very like totally lacking in self-awareness. And it I guess is some insight into the psychology of these protesters, who fancy themselves as heroes or sort of white knights. And there was a good comic that was inspired from this incident, which was a protester kind of in their black bloc sort of garb. Um, Looking into a mirror and seeing reflected back at them a knight, right? In armor and kind of
Yeah.
a heroic thing. And then it turns out that the protester who inspired that comic actually was a LARPer, like did dress up and kind of pretend to be a knight, as a hobby. And it's like, man, that was way more productive and better for society than what you're doing now. Um, right? That was go back to that hobby, that isn't like psychologically damaging to strangers. Anyway, but that's kind of it. It's putting on these flag capes and assuming or appropriating even identities, right? Cloaking oneself in social justice causes so that you can feel good about your antisocial behavior, because it is antisocial.
Yeah, it
Right?
is.
You can call it community all you want, but it is not. It's the opposite of that, and it really I have lost track of the number of times where I've been having or attempting to have kind of a conversation with someone who wants to engage, who maybe has questions or, it is seems to be in good faith. And then someone will like whisk them away, often someone who is wearing a safety vest, like a self-styled marshal, right? Trying to warn them or protect them. And it inhibits any sort of dialogue or growth, and
Yeah.
that's just part of the landscape that's weird.
Yeah, and I mean they're public protests, so you would think that theoretically they would want as many eyes as possible on the message, right? But I think they're really guarded that people could hear anything persuasive
Hmm. Hmm.
from other people.
Yeah.
I did have some good interviews on Tuesday, but unfortunately, because I don't know how to stream properly, my audio was terrible, and I kept changing the settings, and it just wasn't working out. So I'm trying to go through to clip some of the more interesting conversations from my GoPro, even if people are not always framed very well. But it's impossible, like when it comes to Montreal for Palestine, it's impossible to properly interview people. The closest I got to interviewing one of them was a year ago when Mahmoud Khalil found me. He's one of the three primary leaders of Montreal for Palestine at their protests. So I don't know exactly how he found me, but he found me. I was above getting an aerial view. And I could describe the interview as someone screaming in my face for 20 minutes as he got closer to me, started pushing me, stepping on me. And by the end, I was surrounded and I was being pressed up against glass. And I was really starting to feel really unsafe. And so I tried to leave, and then I was gang swarmed and assaulted and had to call 911. But that's the closest I've come to being able to interview one of the people who attends the Montreal for Palestine protests. The daytime protests, even though they were also violent and filled with quite a number of, like, it's like framed as a student protest, and then you get there and you're filming, and like most of the people are middle-aged. Like these are not students. But some of the younger people I was able to talk to and have some interesting conversations with them to get their perception. But there's real gatekeeping if you're having a conversation with someone who may not be one of the like protest circuit types and who just like agrees with the cause. Maybe they're a little bit more placid and they're more open to having a debate or a conversation or to giving their point of view. And then, as you said, like they're always gatekept by their internal internal gatekeepers, really. So
Yeah.
I'm going to try another clip. I'm wondering, okay, I'm going to ask in the comments because I've checked. Somebody said, "Don't be such a neo-Nazi, Caryma." Geez, that's a joke. By the way, I wanted to say for people, I'm not very good at checking the comments, but if people have questions that you'd like me to ask Caryma, feel free. And I could see that someone gave me advice. I did check the source settings for the audio output and everything is set properly, but I'm wondering if people, like, can people who are watching here, can somebody throw up in the comments, like, or can you not hear it either? 1 second. I'm going to, when I play something, I'm going to play a clip. And if, so I can hear this perfectly. Can you hear it, Caryma?
I don't hear a clip.
No. Okay.
The first one worked, but
You hear it?
no.
Okay. Can't hear a video. Okay, so nobody can hear the video. Okay, I'm the only one who can hear it, unfortunately.
This is just like a montage anyway, so it's sort of
Okay.
following one particular character who is interesting because he started off, or claims to have started off, as a Proud Boy on the far right, and then was undercover for Antifa / the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. And it's just a very bizarre story that doesn't really make any sort of sense. What we can discern from it is this is someone who is extreme. And whether it's extreme on the left or extreme on the right, has those tendencies. And this is someone who has showed up outside my office more than once. On one occasion, putting up defamatory stickers, trying to spread like misinformation.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. For people who can't hear, you can go and find all these clips. I apologize. I'm like learning as I go, but he's like screaming expletives in Caryma's face right now. Yeah, sorry. Continue, Caryma.
Yes, and police are standing right there. At some point, police decided to finally kind of take him away. And here he is outside my office. And then this footage was circulated to an account based across the country who posted it. So there really is a network of people who are conspiring together, to achieve whatever ends they're seeking. And it's it's real. It's a real phenomenon. It's weird now that kind of Antifa is really in the news again, because of Donald Trump and this possible terrorist designation, and designated a foreign terrorist organization, which will have implications for Canada because there's Canadian money that goes to activists who self-identify in this way. But it's not pretend. And just because they have termed themselves Antifa, short for anti-fascist, there is no rigor to applying the label fascist. Anything and everything is fascist. There's no due process there. So it isn't actually anti-fascist. I think that the concept of anti-fascism in the literal sense of opposing fascism is probably like not that controversial. I think most people don't like fascist stuff, but and this is not that. It's hijacking the language, hijacking the term, kind of hiding behind the fact of not having kind of a clear organization, right? Or I mean, sometimes there are, but it's a network and it's a movement, and so it's murky, right? And it's deliberately murky because they want to operate kind of in concealed ways. Part of the advice that it is even disseminated from government-funded NGOs that support Antifa is, conceal your face, maybe wear a sports hijab to hide your hair, right? Like COVID masks, but they were masking before COVID, right? And it's just why? Like there's nothing, in my view, that's legitimate about that. Like they're self-deputizing in ways that are inappropriate, frankly, and it's I don't know. It's they're playing pretend, but on a massive scale to the tune of millions of dollars, and in ways that are repeatedly and increasingly transgressing other people's rights. And for whatever reason, it's not being taken seriously or addressed in Canada. And I think that's something that has to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I had wanted to play a clip, but unfortunately, I'm not that great with all the tech. But it was a clip of Dane Lloyd. Here, people can go look for it, either on Alexa's feed or I quote posted it. But here, I'll play it and I can kind of tell people, one sec, I'll put it up in the chat. Tell people what he's saying because it pertains to exactly what you're talking about. So he said there have been allegations made that there was an Antifa member who threw smoke bombs into a church in Montreal this summer. And he's speaking to the public safety minister. And then he's saying the allegations are that it's a government employee who worked for DND. Well, he says a military base, but I believe it's DND. So he asks Gary if he's aware of the allegations, and Gary's response is that it's the police jurisdiction to investigate the matter. It would be the city of Montreal. So then Dane Lloyd says, considering that this is a potential terrorism case, don't you think that it would be a matter for CSIS? No, first he asks if he's concerned. He's talking about. So Gary said he's concerned at every incident of hate. And then he said if the allegation involves government employees, it makes him more concerned. But this is the thing, like he said, it's an incident of hate. Well, it was a crime. So regardless of the motivation behind the crime, like most crimes are committed with a hateful heart. Most people don't attack somebody or abuse them because they have a heart filled with love. That emotion is part of it. But there's an actual crime, which is trespassing, and then setting off an incendiary device during a church service. There are 5 or 6 different crimes that were committed. And regardless of the person's motivation, whether it's hate or whether he did it filled with love and joy, which it certainly wasn't that, the crimes aren't being prosecuted. And so then this discussion becomes about hate. And then it becomes, in my opinion, the liberal government wanting to control people's speech and wanting to control people's motivations, which becomes a lot murkier. So when people are committing violent crimes or property damage or, any type of a crime, I don't think the mean words are necessarily the biggest concern in the case of a crime. I think the biggest concern are the damages to the person, their property, their person. And I'm pretty much a free speech absolutist, but I do think that there should be limitations, obviously, on violent threats or, supporting terrorism. Like there need to be some limitations. The classic fire in a theater example. But it's interesting how the public safety minister redirects, like, not our problem, not our jurisdiction. That's the first argument. And then the second argument is we're concerned by hate. But it's
I think a government that doesn't have a handle on crime has no business trying to regulate hate.
Yeah.
And a government that is involved directly or indirectly in fostering polarization between people has no business regulating hate. I think that, that should be obvious. But the fact that hate has become a cottage industry, is all the more reason that, this is overreach. And there are bills currently before Parliament that purport to address this problem of hate, but are quite draconian in what they are proposing. And it's always, kind of, they bury the lead, and it's hidden in the provisions. But it's quite I don't want to live in that kind of environment, and I don't trust this government or the next government, right? Because eventually a pendulum swings. I think that we should be resisting that with every fiber of our being, because once it's in place, it's all the more difficult to roll back.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really worried, and not least of which because I think that it's going to be primarily directed at people like me, and it's going to limit my ability to criticize the state mostly, and also to criticize different groups and organizations. So yeah, it's extremely worrying, and I understand, I understand that people can be really worried and bothered by certain rhetoric. I relate to that. I get death threats from people. I also have people just say really, like, not criminal things, but just really detestable, just really uncivilized comments. So I understand that people don't want to feel targeted, but trusting the same state that has created all of these issues and that's actively fostering, I believe, hostilities between different groups to monitor people's speech and monitor their emotions, I think is very dangerous and also incredibly foolish, because I think it will end up being applied to only certain people who are criticizing the mainstream narratives or the preferred victim group of the day, and they won't be applied to others. That's my anticipation of all this legislation. And then being able to kick people off the internet is also going to completely undermine all the independent media. And I think that that's part of the goal. I don't have a crystal ball. Maybe that won't happen, but I think that that's part of the goal of the legislation. But I also have to look through it more carefully. I was wondering, so I'm going to add this. I don't think there's any video in this one, right?
No, this is just a fantastic shot. And it's quote tweeting this is a professor at the University of Toronto.
Okay, should I start down here then?
Yeah. So you'll notice there's sort of various insignia, Antifa
Mm.
related patches on their knapsack, on their front. Then the balaclava that they put on in the first image you showed, actually it led people to a defamatory Twitter account focused on myself and my videographer.
One sec. Let's go back after. But like for you, this is all you like, you know, all this. But for people who don't, so up here, there are 3 arrows.
Yeah, so the 3 downward facing arrows are just a common Antifa symbol.
Like
I think
this over here
originally,
too.
yes, exactly right. And originally sort of developed to draw over swastikas and make them, no longer look like swastikas. So that's the origin of it. And then you'll notice on their shirt 3 downward facing baseball bats. And that's referencing the Christie Pitts riots from 1933 in the context of an anti-mass immigration rally at Christie Pitts. And actually, just as an aside, Antifa sort of co-ops that history as being their own, just as they will with World War II and the Allied forces. But it's sort of a historically illiterate interpretation of things.
It's a
It's
lie.
a rewriting of history,
Yeah.
right? It just because it's not the same thing as this movement. Point
Yeah.
blank. And then on the knapsack, you see the 2 flags there, the anti-fascist action flags.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know if
down
it's
here, there's an
possible.
ACAB one, right?
Yeah, although they're cute about it, and it's something about cats. All cats are beautiful,
Oh,
or
okay.
something cutesy like that. But we know what ACAB actually stands for.
Yeah.
All cops are bastards. And this is a professor at the University of Toronto, and we sought to identify them because they put on that balaclava with the defamatory link, and someone who carries that with them, who's a stranger to us, like that's alarming, right? And you want to know.
Where's the link?
I blocked it out. So
Oh, okay.
it's kind
Okay.
of behind this that little blurry thing.
Oh, I see right there. Okay.
Yeah. So, that was reason to want to know who is this person that came equipped with this, ready to go. And we did identify
Wow.
them. And then they proceeded to blame me for doxing, as though they weren't participating in a public protest, blamed me for allegedly receiving death threats to their university email, which, I can't
Where was he
confirm.
working?
University of Toronto.
Wow. What's his area of discipline?
Physics.
I was not expecting that at all. I was expecting you to say, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
like
physics.
Colonial. Yeah. Okay,
Physics.
that's funny.
And actually, like they got, or I don't know, they roped some student into writing a pretty defamatory article in the student newspaper. And they didn't bother reaching out to me for comment or anything like that. So as soon as it came to my attention, I let them know that would be a problem, and they promptly took it down. And this professor, I guess, had saved the link on Wayback Machine and started like pushing it out on their social media and claiming that I had censored it, and just, really odd behavior for someone who makes 6 figures. And, like it's just a weird.
Did you know him? Did you know this person?
No, total stranger. Total stranger.
He just became like fixated.
Well, it turns out that for at least a year, they've been tweeting about, or tooting about me and my videographer, and made at least 1 threat. So I'm kind of pursuing that and in its due course. But it just, like, it's not just street urchins who are part of this network. there are people who are really well connected, who are really well educated, who are wealthy, and who, are participating in this, whether it's because they genuinely believe they're fighting fascism, or this is, a community of sorts, for people who were otherwise isolated, or, it's whatever the case may be, cover for that antisocial behavior, as we were talking about. It is, it's a pool of people in this network, who, it's not all cut from the same cloth, but
No.
it is a real social phenomenon here. It is not imaginary. This is not in my head, and I feel the need to say that, because like the mainstream outlets are gaslighting us.
They're absolutely liars. And I think some of them are also just so lazy and inept that they won't do any basic research or go out in the field for even a day to see what's going on the streets. So I think that's part of it as well. And then I was speaking to somebody who works for one of the legacy media organizations, and she said that almost all of them cut a lot of their journalists, so they don't have very many actual reporters going out reporting, and people are doing more like OSINT and just kind of collecting and curating online rather than going into the streets. So it's also possible, to play devil's advocate, that some of them just simply don't know. But on Tuesday, I haven't had time to look at Alexa's coverage of this. I don't know if she did a report on it or not, but when we were at Place des Arts for the celebration basically of October 7th, in the evening when we were kicked out, it wasn't just myself and someone I was with. It was also the Rebel News crew were kicked out as well. So we were a fair distance from the protest, and we noticed that there were 3 black bloc masked types just lurking around. So they were there for quite a while. And then the speeches finished of Montreal for Palestine, and the march began. So they went south, and then they turned to travel west towards the Israeli consulate on René-Lévesque. So we were following behind, but we had to stay so far behind that we couldn't really hear much, because then it began to pour. There was like a deluge. So there's no point anymore at all. We can't even hear. So we decided to wrap it up. But I noticed that the Antifas were hiding behind one of those pancartes. They're like 3-sided advertisements, on city streets. So they were hiding, like peeking out like little creeps. And so I said, what are we going to do? Because we're wrapping this up. So there was a rebel crew that had a vehicle, and then I was going separately, and like, I don't want to be jumped by these people. So we, everybody wanted everybody else to get home safe. So we went up first to interview them, and they were, I called them Larry, Curly, and Mo, because they were being very cutesy about why they were wearing masks, and c'est la COVID, we're worried about COVID, and this and that, not really giving an answer. But when we started leaving, they followed. So my group split off, and then the Rebel News crew continued, and they followed them, and they ended up having to call the police. They're not a fantasy. These are real people, and some of them are very mentally unhinged, and they had put surgical gloves on. Like, why did they put surgical gloves on after they started following the Rebel News crew? Like, that's scary. Yeah. You're not putting surgical gloves on for any good reason on a summer evening. Like, I can say with confidence, I've never worn surgical gloves out in public in my entire life, not once. I'm a middle-aged woman. Like, I've been around, I've seen things, not once in my life. So that's very premeditated. It's very worrying. So we ended the night after an exhausting day of coverage. Alexa called and I went to give a witness statement. It's exhausting, and all we're doing is trying to cover what is happening on the streets. That's it. Like, if people think that it's normal for these repercussions to happen, like something, sorry, I'm monologuing here, but one of the things that the police keep saying is, if you don't want to get hit, don't cover it. That's kind of like saying to a police officer, if you don't want to risk your life, don't be a police officer. If you're going to complain about being assaulted or shot by somebody, don't be a police officer. Like, obviously that's a nonsensical thing to say.
Yep.
You're doing your work, and we need the law to be imposed when it's lawless. That's what we pay taxes for. We can't be armed. We can't take matters into our own hands, obviously. So as women, we're basically, or men, they also get attacked, like Andy who was almost murdered. You're just trying to report on something, and you're being harassed, you're being stalked, you're being threatened, you're being followed home late at night when it's dark. Like, they are very real. Antifa is very real. And unlike the Americans, Canadians seem to be sleeping at the switch.
I can't really disagree with anything you've said. I was just making a list from September 30th till yesterday. I logged 17 separate incidents that, are either assaults or criminal harassment or obvious acts of intimidation. Of those, police refused to take a report on 1. I filed reports on 9.
Wow.
Of the remainder, police were present for 4. So it is, and every time you file a report, it's quite an arduous process.
Yeah.
Right? The initial call, and then waiting for someone to be dispatched, and then kind of explaining the situation. It's a time-consuming process. But if you don't do that, there are repercussions as well. So, I'm staying the course. But I do hope that at some point there's some form of leadership that emerges to recognize that this problem must be addressed. And it's not the same thing as looking to shut down protests or protesters or prevent freedom of expression. It's quite the opposite, actually, because this group genuinely seem to believe that they are the arbiters of speech and who should be allowed to be in public and exist peacefully. And we can't have that.
No.
I don't know, it's not healthy. And regardless of your political stripe, because they actually, I think I'm an example of this. They don't really care what your politics are.
No.
It's just, are you an inconvenient entity for what we're looking to achieve? So, on that, that's a cheerful note to, we live in bleak times.
I was not involved on Twitter at all. It was Twitter then, until the COVID regime. I had a pretty nice life. I was living my life. And I've always been political. I mean, I studied political science. I worked on elections when I was young. But I've had identical politics. I'm unusual in that regard since I was a child. Like, I'm very consistent. So by 2005, I thought it's finished. Like, civilization's going to collapse. So my approach was just to focus on working and insulating myself as much as possible. And my ability to do that was basically, exploded during the COVID regime. And so I had like a decent sized small following on Facebook and Instagram, but I wasn't getting any traction for any of my comments. And like, normally if I'd post, I had, I don't know, maybe 600 or 700 followers. If I post something, I'd usually get like over 100 likes and lots of comments. but I was getting nothing. Even people who were like-minded were not agreeing with me. So I started on Twitter, but initially I had a locked account, and then I opened it up in I think 2022. I opened it and started posting more, but I had, I think, 400 followers then. But it is the absolute state of the country that is energizing me to do this. And just being so tired of the propaganda, especially the propaganda wars during the COVID regime, it was really painful for so many people, and not for anybody really to be telling the other side, and then people's accounts were getting tossed off, and so yeah, so we do live in bleak times. Like it's forced me out of my bubble in a way to become a lot more politically active and a lot more visible than I ever wanted to be. Like I've never wanted to be part of like a story if I'm writing about something or reporting on it, and I've never wanted to be recognizable at all in my life. But I just think that we don't have many options.
Yeah, if not, we can only really control our own actions. And so to the extent that I still feel that there's value in doing the work that I'm doing, I'll continue to do it. And I think that you're the same, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I wonder, it's not fun being assaulted. It's not. And I realized, like, going with someone who hadn't been to these protests before on Tuesday, seeing things through her eyes was a bit of a wake-up call, because you become immune to the level of hostility and the level of violence and aggression, and just focus on work. Or I don't know if you do, but I do, and just focus on like trying to frame the shots and getting close and figuring out what's going on, and potentially having conversations with people, whatever. Am I noticing everything? Am I aware of what's going on around me? But seeing it through someone else's eyes made me realize like how bad things are.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you.
I'm just going to look quickly. If anybody has any questions for Caryma that I haven't covered, because Caryma, I've kept you longer than I said I would, and I know you're probably exhausted because it's late.
No, this is time flies when you're having fun, and I'm very glad to have this conversation, and we can always pick it up.
Me too. I don't know much about you, so it's been good. People don't have questions. I'm very surprised. I'm always like, when I watch other people give interviews, I'm like, why didn't they ask this? Why didn't they ask that? But that's okay. So before you go, is there anything? Oh, Chris is asking, I'm wondering when Caryma is going to join Antifa and denounce her Nazism.
I actually started off as Queen Antifa, according to the freedom fighters. Yes. So I maybe have moved in the wrong direction. I don't know. I'm sorry.
You're being radicalized.
I'm sorry to everyone. I am radicalized. And watch, they're going to clip that. And
yeah,
we're going to find that clip. I'm going to find that clip, and it's going to
explode.
Haunt
My approach with things, like most people watch what they say. My approach is the other direction. I just say everything I want all the time, and there's such
flood the universe. There's too much, Anyway, this is all AI, so anything that I've said that isn't good, this isn't real. So
she's not real. It's like the woman on the plane. She's not real. Made it up. No, it's interesting. When I interviewed someone yesterday, I'll keep you a little bit longer, but I was having a conversation with two people. And at this point I was covering like Quebec nationalists who were doing a counter protest of the university students. So we were in front of the Roddick Gates at McGill, and I was having a conversation, and the woman had an accent. So I asked where she was from, and the man who was with her, who's a visible minority, was very offended by this. And so I wanted to, have a conversation, and we did have a conversation. It was very civilized, but he was really, really offended. And he said something that I thought was so funny. He was like, "You act all nice." He was like, "I am. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not nice." Like, it's like, what? I act what? Like, are you okay? It's like I'm fair. I'm kind. I'm not really nice.
And
But
I don't think that protests are the place to be nice. I made this point
no,
yesterday.
there's a
It's
job. Like it's a job, right?
and protesters themselves are there to cause a scene, make people feel uncomfortable, push people out of their comfort zone. So how could you then expect to feel comfortable? Right? Everyone should feel safe, but we can't
Yeah.
conflate safety with comfort. And I think that protesters will routinely do that while at the same time infringing on other people's actual safety. So it's a bit warped. I see a question here.
Okay.
And they think
If you
that I have,
find the courage to do what you do.
yeah, which is thank you for sort of the implication in that question there. And no one else really was doing it when I started. I think now there are kind of more independent people I recognize on the scene who are doing their thing. And I think that's
Yeah.
fantastic, even where I may not, like, we don't have to agree on the interpretation or on perspective, like it, but just being there and having a voice, I think there's utility in that. So I continue to do it because it feels necessary. Is the short answer.
Yeah. And do you feel secure? Because there's this
No,
recurring theme of your things being stolen and
no, it is not secure. It isn't safe. My head's on a swivel. I have to take safety precautions that are annoying and time consuming and sometimes expensive and just overall an irritation. But that's just them's the breaks, right?
yeah. And is your videographer okay? I feel like he takes a lot of physical abuse as well. Like that weird sexual assault. I remember that from
Yeah.
the
And
summer.
today someone had, a sign telling him to pull his pants up, right? Which I think was referencing that. So
Yeah.
it's again unprincipled, right? And that was unacceptable. It's being prosecuted, and now is in the hands of the Crown Attorney, right? Police did what they can do, and we'll see sort of how it unfolds. But that was, for those who aren't aware, someone crept up behind him and yanked his pants down, exposing him fully to a crowd, to a hostile crowd, who then now use that as fodder for jokes. But it wouldn't be a joke if it happened to a mainstream reporter. It wouldn't be a joke if it happened to a protester. And it's not a joke here.
No, it was disgusting. We would still be talking about it if it happened to somebody from the CBC. And can you imagine if it happened to a woman?
Yeah. Yep. So
Yeah.
those double standards, it can't continue. It's not sustainable. It's not good for general morale, I think. It undermines the sense of equality. It kind of, and then you have this hierarchy of oppression that simply doesn't exist at law, but in practice, because of politics, it does, based on what's fashionable. And that, is also not conducive to a healthy society.
Yeah. No, it's not. I had one fun moment on Tuesday. It's not all depressing, but it was actually the most reasonable person who was protesting, who I spoke with, was actually Eve Engler the other day, and he seemed downright excited to see me.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, he calls me a genocidal, whatever, a genocider constantly online. Like he's really very colorful in his use of language online, but he was quite excited. And I just thought afterwards, like if Eve Engler is the most, because he went to my university. I'm about the same age as him, I think. So if he is the voice of reason, he's someone who's
Well,
it's a bad sign. It's a bad sign for the bedfellows in the protest, because he seemed the most laid back, and like he's, he can get pretty turned up. But that was an amusing conversation because of all the NDP stuff. But I told him I'm rooting for him for the NDP, I told him I thought he best exemplified the values of the NDP. I agree. Like, I believe that. And I think
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a communist. Like, I want him to win. He deserves it. And he honestly believes it. Like, unlike, I think, a lot of them, like he's being consistent for 25 years in what he's believed, Yeah. And he's out there working hard, walking around, yelling at people.
I've never seen him with a Rolex or a Versace bag. So
There's still time.
he has that on Jagmeet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that note, I think I will let you go. It was very nice having you on. Oh, what? No?
I want to answer one last question,
Okay.
which is who's my favorite wrestler and why? And the answer is it's Chris Jericho. He's Canadian, and he constantly reinvents himself in ways that I find exciting. And yeah, so it fitting, right, to end it on a wrestling note.
There's actually one more question for you, if you don't mind.
Oh, look at that. Am I hopeful for the future of Canada? Right now, Canada seems to be a divided country. Canadians seem angry and frustrated. I agree with both of those sentiments. But I don't think that all hope is lost. And I don't think that we can practically move forward if we take that attitude. As much as things are bleak, and that is the case, and that is the reality, there are also little pockets of possibility and opportunity, and so I do believe that. I see it happen on the ground in real life, and kind of in the conversations that maybe people are afraid to have online or afraid to have publicly. So there is, in addition to the sentiment of frustration and anger and division, there are a lot of people who are fed up with that, and who aren't wanting to veer to one extreme or the other. So I think, again, we can only really control ourselves and be reasonable. Kind of, it starts there. It starts with us, and that gives me a sense of hope.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
Where there's life, there's hope.
There you go. Thank you so much, Natasha, for having me.
You are very welcome. I'm going to also, I never say, I'm like, people, they're good about like, oh, I hit this milestone. Thank you to, I never say that. I'm like, I'm not great. So thank you very much to everybody for tuning in. I appreciate the support. I really do. Like, I really do, but I'm just not good at expressing that all the time with the milestones and things like that. But thank you for tuning in. And as always with these, except in the case of one, which I have to remember now that I'm thinking to do it, I will also, once it comes up, once it uploads, I will put it on YouTube as well, or Rumble for people who prefer that. It just takes me a little while. Sometimes it takes me, in the case of Matt Alexander, sometimes it takes me weeks. But I can be forgetful. So remind me, but I'll send you the links as well, and you can post them on your socials and everything. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming.
And thank you everyone for watching.
Yes. And I will see you around sooner or later, probably. If you come to Montreal, let me know. I'm
staying the hell out of Montreal.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. But okay. Or maybe Ottawa.
Ottawa's a middle ground.
Yes. And yes, before, to say something positive about the police, I know that people have had variable experiences in Ottawa with the police handling of things, but my last experience was positive, and to the point where actually a police officer thanked me for the work that I was doing and said that it was really important for people to see it. And the videographer who I was with said that he thought that the police officer who was walking with us, because we were cutting to get a different shot, he felt he was actually like accompanying us to try to keep us safe. So I didn't think about that at the time, but it was nice.
Good. And yeah, so there we go. Little pockets of hope.
Little pockets of hope. All right. So I'm going to end this. There will be a couple seconds. So just, bear with me. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will see you around. And I will try and also put up the clips in the comments so that people can see. I'm sorry about the tech. I do my best, but I'm just not great.
You did great.
Thank you. Have a good night. Bye everybody.